We're going to start with Allison Chu and Ellen Sauer, two students who are part of the Gershwin initiative, and they're working with us in our undergraduate research program. Allison Chu is pursuing dual undergraduate degrees in clarinet performance and English, and Ellen Sauer is studying flute performance. They work with the Gershwin Initiative blog team and recently received an SMTD Excel grant to further their research on what they will be talking about today in New York. They went to the New York Public Library to do some of this research. I'll also add that Allison is performing tonight in the clarinet section in Porgy and Bess. So thank you, let's welcome them.
Blue Monday, also known by its later revised title, 135th Street, lives mostly in obscurity, often passed over in the scope of George Gershwin's oeuvre. Most mentions of Blue Monday refer to the 20-minute opera as a failure, citing its initial single-night run and subsequent scarcity of revivals. Furthermore, few secondary sources examine Blue Monday from a comprehensive background, and background information is scattered and incomplete. We aim to consolidate sources, verify inconsistencies, and re-examine primary material to begin to fill a scholarly gap. In these processes, we have found this little-known work to have surprisingly large ramifications for the rest of Gershwin's career. Blue Monday not only marks the beginning of important collaborations and relationships in Gershwin's life, but it also provides a window into his first attempt at operatic writing and its implications for his later works.
A collaboration with librettist Buddy De Silva, Blue Monday was originally commissioned for George White's Scandals of 1922, where it was premiered in August of that year. The George White Scandals were an annual Broadway revue, a more expensive form of entertainment than vaudeville shows, but otherwise quite similar. These newly composed variety shows featured scantily clad dancers, large song numbers, blackface sketches, and comedy sequences, often parodying current events or public figures. Gershwin and Buddy De Silva were the primary composer-lyricist team for the 1922 Scandals. A Tin Pan Alley lyricist, De Silva would contribute to 5 more Scandals productions. Gershwin, already on his third Scandals, would work with him on 2 of those. In an interview with his biographer, Isaac Goldberg, George claimed that he and De Silva discussed, quote, for some time the possibilities of writing an opera for colored people, end quote. They presented their idea to George White, who agreed to include the number just 3 weeks before the performance. White may have seen this as an opportunity to capitalize on the recent success of Shuffle Along, a 1921 musical with an all-black cast. The final product, created in 5 days, failed to meet this mark. While it resembled Shuffle Along in themes and setting, Blue Monday was staged in blackface and incorporated racial slurs.
Reception of the tryout of the 1922 Scandals in New Haven, Connecticut was generally positive. One reviewer even remarked that the production team had, quote, done one thing which will, or ought to, go down in history. They have given us the first real American opera. However, critical response was much more mixed after the New York premiere on August 28th. Charles Darnton of the New York World wrote a particularly scathing review, calling Blue Monday, quote, the most dismal and stupid blackface sketch that has probably ever been perpetrated, end quote. On the other hand, another New York reviewer saw in Blue Monday, quote, the first gleam of a new American musical art. Ultimately, Blue Monday was an unusual act for a review, a tragedy introducing the new genre of jazz opera conflicted with the popular and comedic vein of the show. Claiming that it was too long and sad for audiences, George White took Blue Monday off the program after the opening night.
Blue Monday begins with a narrated introduction setting the scene in a, quote, colored saloon on Harlem's 135th Street. The curtain opens on Mike, the proprietor, deriding his employee Sam, who laments his situation with the work's title number. The saloon pianist, known in different productions as Cokie Lou, Cokie, or Sweet Pea, enters and tussles briefly with the show's villain, Tom. Their scuffle is interrupted by the entrance of the heroine, Vi, in a lilting opening aria set to the tune of George's string quartet, Lullaby. She asks if anyone has seen her lover, Joe. Mike leaves to look for Joe when Tom seizes the opportunity to make advances on Vi. She rejects him, brandishing a gun Joe gave her. Vi heads upstairs and Joe enters the saloon. Mike asks Joe how he plans to use his recent gambling winnings, and Joe responds with the slow, spiritual-like aria, "I'm going to see my mother." He explains that he cannot tell Vi of his plans to visit his family down south because she is too jealous and would never let him go. Joe bids Mike farewell and greets Vi, who sings him a love song to the same tune as her opening number. Joe then excuses himself to receive a telegram. Meanwhile, Tom slips in and tells Vi that the telegram is from a woman, and she rushes down to demand it from Joe. He refuses, and she shoots him in a fit of passion. She then reads the telegram, discovering that it is from Joe's sister, informing Joe of their mother's passing. Vi realizes her mistake and collapses, begging Joe's forgiveness. He forgives her, and in his dying breaths, reprises his aria, which takes on new meaning as he prepares to reunite with his mother in heaven.
To astute opera listeners, this plot may seem familiar. Gershwin and De Silva used Leoncavallo's 1892 Verismo opera Pagliacci as a template for Blue Monday. Indeed, parodying classic works had been a staple of minstrel shows dating back decades, and referencing Italian opera was common in vaudeville shows at the time. In both Pagliacci and Blue Monday, one character steps out in front of the curtain to introduce the opera. He addresses the audience and invites them into the show. In Pagliacci, the audience is informed they will see, quote, "men love as in real life they love, and true hatred, and shouts of both rage and grief and cynical laughter," end quote. Lifting this form, Gershwin and De Silva's narrator explains that, quote, "like the white man's opera, the theme will be love, hate, passion, and jealousy." The narrators of both shows bid the audience to pay special attention to the drama before the curtain opens. However, throughout, these two shows continue to bear plot similarities. In both, a man is rejected by the heroine, sets a bloody revenge in motion. Gershwin and De Silva maintain the large plot points, but flip the roles in their vaudeville feature. While in Leoncavallo's drama, it is the leading man, Canio, who murders his wife, Neda, after a spurned suitor alerts him to an affair she is having, in the Scandals Team adaptation, the spurned suitor, Tom, incites false suspicion in the leading lady, Vi, provoking her to murder her lover, Joe.
Vaudeville performers were rarely classically trained, but Gershwin's Blue Monday demanded a certain versatility from White's cast. With an ear toward innovation, Gershwin combined aria-like solos, jazz recitative, and melodrama to present the story that crossed genres and blended traditions. Howard Pollock notes that it is a testament to the versatility of vaudeville actors of the time that they could perform Blue Monday with as much ease as the glitzier show tunes on the review. Blue Monday's style and form bridge the gap between the established conventions of Italian opera and American theater, setting the stage for a more complete synthesis in the Gershwin's Porgy and Bess.
The original score for Blue Monday was orchestrated by William H. Vaudrey, a Black Broadway composer and arranger. Around 1910, Vaudrey worked for Florenz Ziegfeld's celebrated Follies, on which George White modeled his own review. A decade later, Vaudrey worked as an arranger for the successful musical Shuffle Along, and joined the creative team for George White's 1922 Scandals soon thereafter. There are records of a professional relationship between Gershwin and Vaudrey dating back as early as 1917, when Gershwin turned to Vaudrey for career advice after leaving the Remick Publishing House. Vaudrey continued to mentor Gershwin for a number of years, securing him a job at the Fox City Theater and providing compositional guidance for Concerto in F. Today, Vaudrey's role in the history of American music is largely overlooked, and much of his work is lost. Blue Monday is among the few in full score that remain. Vaudrey followed Gershwin's holograph score of Blue Monday closely, translating Gershwin's ideas into an orchestral context. His most significant addition to Gershwin's work was the subtitle Opera a la Afro-American. In his score, Vaudrey often doubles vocal lines with instrument voices, creating heavily reinforced soundscapes. This orchestration was premiered by the 1922 Scandals Pit Orchestra under the baton of Max Steiner. This orchestration, Vaudrey's score indicates instrumentation popular for review orchestras: 2 flutes, 1 doubling piccolo, oboe doubling English horn, 2 clarinets, bassoon, 2 horns, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, percussion, strings, in which it is interesting to note there are both first and second written viola parts, and harp. Unlike later versions, the review orchestration did not include pianos or saxophones. This, combined with Vaudry's preference for woodwind and string sonorities over brass, resulted in a more classical sound when compared to later orchestrations. The next orchestration appeared just 3 years later, in 1925, when Ferdy Grofé reorchestrated the piece for Paul Whiteman's orchestra. The Whiteman's orchestra's unique instrumentation necessitated changes to Vaudry's score, and it brought emphasis to the jazz-inspired aspects of Gershwin's original. Paul Whiteman first met Gershwin when his orchestra performed separately in the 1922 Scandals, and it was Blue Monday that led him to commission Rhapsody in Blue in 1924. Hoping to recapture the success of his 1924 Experiment in Modern Music concert, Whiteman specifically requested that Grofé emphasize these jazzier elements in his 1925 arrangement of Blue Monday. This arrangement was clearly intended for the Whiteman Orchestra alone. As you can see, Grofé favored writing the musicians' names directly in his score rather than relying on instrument designations, a technique he would again use in Rhapsody in Blue. Grofé was the logical choice for the orchestration. As the pianist and arranger of the Whiteman Orchestra, he had already arranged Gershwin's Yankee Doodle Blues and That American Boy of Mine, and had orchestrated Rhapsody in Blue. We can hear hints of the famous opening clarinet solo of Rhapsody in Blue already manifesting in the prologue of Blue Monday. For the 1925 production, Whiteman wanted Blue Monday to serve as the main attraction. The 20-minute jazz opera would conclude the program as a concert performance with vocal soloists. In the 3 years since Blue Monday's premiere, De Silva's original libretto was lost, so De Silva himself reconstructed it to the best of his memory. Like the premiere, this production was also performed in blackface, combining members of the original cast with new actors. Included among the new cast was Charles Hart, a black actor who also performed in blackface. Grofé retitled the work 135th Street, a title John Andrew Johnson suggests was made to distinguish the title number, Blue Monday Blues, from the work as a whole. However, despite changes in orchestration, title, and performance context, Blue Monday once again received a lukewarm reception. By 1945, another version of Blue Monday was in the works. Hollywood composer and arranger George Baseman had previously encountered Gershwin's work with the 1937 film production of A Damsel in Distress. His final piano vocal reduction of Blue Monday is the first and remains the only published edition. Baseman's version of the libretto sanitized the language of the show, removing uses of the N-word and replacing phrases like, quote, colored saloon and white man's opera. These changes are consistent with similar alterations made to Porgy and Bess around the same time by Ira Gershwin. Excerpts from Baseman's setting of Blue Monday appear in the 1945 Warner Brothers Gershwin biopic, Rhapsody in Blue. It is worth noting that although the Paul Whiteman Orchestra plays in the movie, they did not accompany the original 1922 production, which is incorrectly cited in multiple sources. Baseman's complete version was used in a 1953 omnibus television broadcast, performed for the first time by an all-black cast. The vast majority of productions and recordings since cite Baseman as the arranger. In our research, we have come across 3 iterations of Baseman's piano vocal score, but have yet to locate the full orchestration. Though Baseman's version was published, there are still musical and lyrical discrepancies in more recent recordings.
Because it only appeared in the 1922 Scandals for one night, most consider Blue Monday to be a failure. While revivals sprinkled throughout the 21st century have begun to dispel the notion that it is musically irrelevant, much work still remains to establish Blue Monday as a crucial part of Gershwin's compositional development. Our research thus far has begun to uncover significant musical and narrative parallels to Porgy and Bess, and we will continue to explore these intricacies in greater detail. Our preliminary score analysis has revealed variance in instrumentation, style, and voicing among the existing versions of Blue Monday, and we anticipate that further comparison will unveil influences on Gershwin's later compositional and orchestrational techniques. Rather than merely glossing over these 20 minutes of operatic showbiz, musicologists and performers alike should consider Blue Monday as a point of reference for a more nuanced and complete understanding of Porgy and Bess and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, both of you. And we have a first question. Here we go.
I believe I heard this in a double CD album that came out about 20 years ago called The Gershwins Go to Hollywood, where they had snippets of different Gershwin pieces done by many different bands in the movies. And most likely because of Rhapsody in Blue, it was included in The Gershwins Go to Hollywood, but it was only a snippet. Is there a full recording available now that is in any form that we can get our hands on?
Thank you for that question. So right now, we have various recordings of the basement arrangement, but unfortunately, the Grofé arrangement has not been recorded. We also have one recording, I believe it's by Cincinnati Pops? Mm-hmm. Cincinnati Pops Orchestra that has done the Vaudry arrangement, but we are hoping to uncover more complete versions, and we're still looking for that Grofé recording. So another point of research to continue. Oh, we also have the 1993 Marin Alsop recording on, I believe it's on Concordia. That one is, I think it's also the basement arrangement as well.
But the 1945 was a basement arrangement?
Yes.
And it's the 1945 arrangement that you would have heard is an incomplete shortened version that was used for the biopic.
Excellent. Any other questions? Oh, we've got more. I'll give one to Naomi here.
Thank you so much for this information. And I want to ask you, and maybe it's not fair, but with this last slide, it's so tantalizing. Is there anything you can say from what your preliminary research that does look to Porgy and Bess? Can you give us any indication of some of the things that you want to pursue further?
Absolutely. So as of right now, we haven't had a chance to completely go through Porgy and Bess because there's so much material there. But I've noticed playing with the orchestra for Porgy and Bess that there are very similar accent marks in the woodwinds. I believe it's from the African dance, inspired dance in Act 2, Scene 2. Yes, Act 2, Scene 2. The accents are very similar to the opening timpani line that's not pictured in Gershwin's holograph, but is present in all of the other arrangements. There's other similarities that look forward, such as the plot similarities, the drinking, also, what other ones?
I mean, we have the plot similarities are interesting, especially also in the way that they diverge. Blue Monday being set in a urban setting versus Porgy and Bess being rural, but both dealing with colored casts. And the intention that we want to look into further of Gershwin saying he wanted this to be an opera for, quote, colored people, and whether or not the fact that it was realized as a blackface sketch was because of White's cast, because they only had 3 weeks to produce it, or because he was already thinking to something like Porgy and Bess down the road. I have to sit down. Go for it.
Excellent. We have a question back here as well.
Just a quick question. I thought I heard you say something about the orchestra was under the baton of Max Steiner?
Yes.
Okay, would this have been perhaps beginning of some connection between him and George Gershwin in the future? Because they both went to Hollywood.
Yes, another possibility that we would like to look into, definitely down the road. We do know that Max Steiner, who was conducting the Scandals Orchestra, was the one who conducted the original premiere. So that's the connection for Blue Monday there. Thank you.
And for anyone who might not know, Max Steiner was the composer who wrote the music for King Kong and kind of set classical Hollywood on its way. So. Did he do? Yeah. To Gone with the Wind as well.
More of a comment. I mean, before Porgy and Bess, if anybody listens to the recording of Let 'Em Eat Cake, you hear music that you know that George started to hear and became adapted into Porgy and Bess. I mean, Let 'Em Eat Cake was a flop, but they got some great music in it. Musically, it starts going in that direction.
There's also another similarity in the dance music of Blue Monday. There's a big dance scene where the chorus takes over, possibly also to give a little bit of chance for a set change. That also is very similar to the dance music I was noting in Porgy and Bess. So another possible avenue of exploration.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you just give me an idea, when you say you're finding these similarities in this or that, to Porgy and Bess, how do you make those comparisons? Do you go note for note? And you talked about the accents. I mean, how do you really, besides playing it, how would you do that?
A lot of listening, I think. I think the accent note that I've seen was probably because I was actually playing it and had to make those accents myself. And I was noting that in recordings, because I've had the recordings on loop trying to get through this project, that I've heard the same thing before. And so I think a lot of what we're probably going to go forward in doing to do the comparison is gestural and seeing what kinds of styles, and maybe the grace note here is similar in another example, the tempos, the styles also referring to not just is it a waltz, is it a spiritual, but also looking at how the lines are composed. So thank you. Yeah, one more question.
I'd be interested to ask about the kind of this may be not part of your research, I don't know, but just a question to think about in my mind, and maybe in yours too. I'm wondering about the social conscience of the Gershwins and what changed for them in a context of wanting to do things in blackface or have shows done in blackface, and then moving into no, we want to have black performers. Have you encountered anything on that?
It's definitely an angle we would like to explore further. We are thinking that the original decision to premiere the piece in blackface was because of the limited resources the review had. So the review had a cast of white actors and actresses that, because of the timeline of the show, they just decided, for simplicity's sake, unfortunately, that they would do it in blackface. But because we've seen revivals now, or we've heard of revivals done with an all-black cast, it's interesting to consider, definitely going forward, of how that change would happen. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.